Welcome to the June Constructive Rest. And this block in my classes, we've been looking at breathing. And, there's all sorts of interesting breathing exercises out there. Some of them good, some of them perhaps not so useful. Some of them quite extraordinary. But I feel what we really need to master is breathing in an everyday capacity, just breathing in, breathing out in response to life. Because actually life, anything from a difficult conversation to a habitual tendency will give us an opportunity to stop breathing, to hold our breath, or to shallow breathe, or to do something else peculiar with our breathing. And by the time we're really quite young, we'll have got into a habitual way of breathing, which may or may not be as useful as it can be for us. And in the world of Alexander, although the work we're doing is in fact all about creating appropriate tone throughout your musculature and support in order that your breathing is just doing itself, we actually don't talk about it that much. And anyone who's joined my classes will know that we come back round to it sort of, every so often. Because if your musculature is organized, if you have the appropriate tone around that cylindrical rib cage of yours, then those ribs can all expand and release with ease with each breath. And if I was to ask you now to pause a moment and notice your own breathing, often just the act of noticing our breathing will start us doing something a little bit odd with it. So I'm going to say to you, pause a moment and notice the air coming in through your nostrils. And notice the air as it comes out of your nostrils. And let that be all. Just this air coming in at its own pace, and the air leaving again. So breathing is something that we're doing automatically, except we can interfere with it. And as I said at the beginning, quite likely by now there'll be some habitual tendency, a sort of breathing too much, breathing too little, oh, who knows. But this evening I thought we'd keep it quite simple and we'd focus on you, the back of you, the sides of you, the front of you, your cylindrical rib cage. So I'd like you to become aware of the lower part of your ribs, starting at the back of you, at the spine. I'd like you to, in your mind, track a mental image from that spine, sweeping down to your waist and around and up into your costal arch. Just know that those ribs wrap around you. And just with your normal breathing, don't do anything weird. Allow the freedom of those lower ribs. That movement. Because the movement of the ribs isn't just at the front of you or at the sides of you, it's at the back of you as well. And it isn't expanded and huge, and there isn't an enormous amount of displacement of the innards, your bags and tubes. There is a small displacement, so there will be a small rise and fall of your belly, but this is not where your lungs are. So we are not breathing in our belly. We are noticing that perhaps there is some sort of displacement of your bags and tubes as the air comes in and the diaphragm moves down. So let's move up in your world of ribs to somewhere a little bit higher. I'd say somewhere a little bit diaphragmy, or a simpler way of me saying it is just sort of around and below the bra line. And in that same mapping way that we were just doing, I'd like you to start roughly somewhere at the back of you from that spine, and know that those ribs sweep round and down and up into the solar plexus at the top of your costal arch. And they're all around you, these ribs. So as the air comes in through your nose and out through your nose, those ribs also move. And you might notice them in the back of you. You might notice, oh yes, I can feel as I breathe that the rib cage pushes into the floor a little, and then springs away from it. So look at this, we're 10 minutes in and I haven't even mentioned freeing your neck. Can this possibly be an Alexander session? I don't know. So let's think a moment about some more traditional thoughts. Let's ask the jaw to be soft, the tongue to softly rest in your mouth. And ask for the muscles through the sides of the neck and the back of the neck to be soft and easy, so that the weight of your head is appropriately supported on that block, on that book, on that cushion. Freeing your neck to allow the weight of your own head to rest into the ground. And as you do so, you may become aware of the shoulder girdle, the tops of your arms resting into the ground. Let go in your left armpit and then over in your right. And perhaps think about the broadness of you going from left armpit to right armpit. Notice your shoulder blades. Perhaps they're quite flat, perhaps they're a bit pokey outy, perhaps one's doing one thing, one's doing another thing. Just notice them, don't judge them. In your mind, I'd like you to ask those shoulder blades to sort of fall away from the back of your rib cage, falling away into the ground. Not pushing, not shoving, but more of a letting go through the back of the shoulder girdle and easing off. Let your arms rest wherever they're resting, by your sides, on your body, whatever's going on for you. Send your brain there and say, oh, there's my hands doing nothing. My wrists, forearms and elbows, all doing nothing. The weight of the arms quite happily resting there. And then let's come back to the rib cage. And this time we're going to think about the ribs very high up. The ribs that reach right up under your shoulder blades and higher. The ribs that are right under your armpits and higher. The ribs that wrap away all the way around and connect to the ends of your collarbone at the base of the front of your neck. If you can, just using that map again, thinking your way from somewhere around the back of you, maybe between your shoulder blades, maybe even higher, sweeping around, and those ribs coming round to meet at the top of your breastbone or the ends of your collarbones. And you're going to say to yourself that these too can be free. This cylindrical part of your rib cage can expand and release as the breathing comes in through the nose and out through the nose. So we've sectioned your ribs into three parts. We've got the bottom level, we've got the mid level, and we've got the upper. And all of those parts of ribs, back, front, and sides, bottom, middle, and upper, are moving all the time. Just a little bit. Not heaving, not, doing peculiar things, not one after the other, just all happening all of the time. A gentle movement like a wave lapping the shore. Don't overthink it. And sometimes that can happen when we're breathing. As soon as we think about breathing, as I said earlier, we often do something a bit funny. And if that happens, and if you're really getting yourself into a pickle, just send your mind off somewhere else, perhaps down to your feet, saying hello to your left foot and your right foot, and noticing the support that travels up through your lower leg bones, reaching your kneecaps. And then you could ask your knees to let go a little bit, to release. The muscles around them don't need to be quite as tight as you think, probably. And you could almost imagine those knees are releasing upwards towards the ceiling. Knees forward. And from those springy knees, you're going to think your way along your thigh bones and back down into your hip sockets, as if the weight of the thighs are happily resting, nestling in the hip sockets. And while you're down in your pelvis, you may as well think that that's widening. Almost as if the heads of your thigh bones are releasing away from each other, creating a sense of tone and width through the pelvis. Just a thought, not a doing, not an action, just a thought. An intention, a want and a wish. So let's say hello again to the rib cage. Let's notice and do nothing as we allow the lower ribs to expand and release. Expanding as the breath comes in and the diaphragm moves down. Releasing back again as the breath moves up, up and out through your nose. On your next in-breath, you might want to imagine or think of the middle section of ribs, releasing, opening out, widening, deepening, accommodating the air that's rushing into your lungs. And then gently that air can leave. And of course, it's difficult because not all of you will be breathing in the same rhythm as your neighbours. But we can only do this in our own time, in your own time, your own breathing. And on your next in-breath, you might like to think about the upper ribs, those ones all the way around under the collarbones and the armpits, expanding as the air comes in, fills your lungs, releasing again as the air leaves through your nose. And then we're going to leave that thought alone and come back to your neck, since we're up here anyway. Hello, neck. Perhaps asking for the softness through the front of the neck this time, easy in the jaw. Thinking of a broadening through the base of the back of the skull as the weight of your head rests back on your block or book or cushion. And whilst you're letting your upper arms rest down and into the ground and the weight of your arms just be there, you might notice that gentle movement of the ribs, expanding and releasing in all ways, continuously like the wave lapping at the shore. And if something's come in that's a little bit judgy on your breathing, a little bit, oh, but I'm doing this. This doesn't seem right. You can let that shit go. Because perfection was not built in a day. And the best thing you can do is be soft and kind to yourself whenever you're dealing with any kind of breathing. Because it's very deep work and it can bring up a bit of stuff. Let yourself breathe. Don't get in the way. You're in charge of freeing your neck, allowing the gentle lengthening through the spine, the widening through the back. You're in charge of softening your belly and being easy through the hips. You're in charge of your left foot and your right foot and their restful connection with the ground. Just allow your breathing to do itself. You're giving it its best chance to do the best breathing ever. By attending to your use, by attending to the quality of your musculature, the appropriate tone from the crown of your head all the way through to your tailbone. And lightly thinking out through the crown of your head, whilst knowing where your pelvis and your tailbone is going to help give plenty of space for that air to come in through your nostrils, all the way through your 3 parts of your rib cage, and release back out again. So we're going to do one more thing, one more breathy thing. After me telling you not to do anything funny with your breath, we are now going to do something funny with our breath. In your own time, you're going to let all of the breath out, just gently breathing every last drop. In the pause at the end of that empty breath, you're going to ask your back muscles, your rib cage, to release and to allow the fresh air to come rushing back in through your nose, all the way into your ribs, your lungs, your body, at which point you just let it all go again. And we'll all be doing this at different paces. And maybe you'd like to do it a couple of times. I wouldn't do it a lot of times, but a couple of times. Letting all of the air out so that you're empty, and you wait until the end of that, where you pause and you release. And in that release, that moment, the air comes rushing back in again. And when you're full, you breathe that out again. One of the she's a friend, in fact, she's a friend and a client in my classes, is a voice worker and songwriter and a singer. And she says there's a lovely phrase in the world of singing, which is, if in doubt, breathe out. And I think that is a lovely phrase. So if you find that you're working and you've been sat at your computer and you're doing whatever it is you do, and you realize that in fact you've been shallow breathing, you have not been breathing very well, or indeed holding your breath, let it out. Release your back and let that air come rushing back in again. So we've been lying on the floor, you've been lying on the floor for about 20 or so minutes. And this is a very good time to be lying on the ground. Sometimes it flies by, sometimes it feels like an eternity. It always depends, I think, where our head's at. But if you're thinking, as I am, that it's probably time to be coming to an end, you might want to start rocking the pelvis side to side, the knees. You might want to start just informing the body that it wants to, that in some point soon it will be moving and getting up. If you're staying there, then that's absolutely fine. You can stay there. I'm not going to force you to get up again. But whatever you're doing, you're going to take your time, and it's going to be mindful and connected to your breath. And whilst some of you are fidgeting and rocking and making your way up to sitting, I'm going to remind all of you that breath work is deep work. And even something as simple as 20 minutes doing the work that we've done can bring stuff up. So be kind to yourself, not just this evening, but in the coming days. And if you're continuing to do breath work, continue to be kind to yourself.